News Talk 94.5 WPTI, 96.7 FM WTOB. You're listening to the Wealth Guardian Show with Doug Ray, helping you retire the job and keep the paycheck. In the studio this morning, you have Garrett, Ray, and Brice Payne. Brice is freshly returned from the mountains of Utah and fresh powder. And this morning, we're going to welcome him back to the studio for the new year. And very fittingly, our topic today is New Year, New Me, how to change your money attitude in 2025. Good morning, Brice.
Good morning, Garrett. Thanks for holding down the office and the recording studio here in my absence. I presume everything went well.
It did. I hope you and Belle had a good little retreat out to Utah. Brice was technically on a business trip out to Utah with a bunch of other advisors that we have a relationship and association with. And Brice did qualify for a special trip. So congratulations to you, sir, on a great 2024.
In all fairness, you did too, but you just chose not to go.
Yeah. So, but we definitely missed Brice to open up the new year, but he is back. He is ready. He is engaged and looking forward to this episode.
And let's go ahead and get to this. Let's start off with the Wealth Guardian Service Salute. If you've listened to our radio show before, you know that we want to take a minute here at the start of every show and just acknowledge and thank and express our gratitude, all of the first responders and men and women in uniform out there who this country couldn't exist the way that it does without you and your sacrifices and your family sacrifices. So here is that moment where we salute you and say thank you for everything that you do. We know oftentimes it is a thankless job, and we don't want it to be thankless from our perspective. So thank you. We appreciate your everything you do. And Garrett, thank you for your service, and to Doug for your service as well. Now, again, before we get started on the meat and potatoes of the show, something else that we always do is we take a second and ask ourselves a question, and we can ask it to you out there as well, to better get to know your Wealth Guardian advisor. And so the question is, and Garrett doesn't know what this question is, so we're going to put him right here on the spot. We didn't get a chance to review this before the show. So Garrett, it's an easy one.
Okay.
What is one of your fondest memories?
Ooh, one of my fondest memories. I definitely have to say it would be summers as a child, no school.
Oh yeah, sure.
And I was fortunate enough that my grandparents on my father's side, they lived in southeastern North Carolina, not on the beach by any means, but a couple of miles away, drive from the beach. And my grandmother, my grandfather was still working at the time, but my grandmother would take me and my younger brother out for hours. And I know she had to have been baking in the sun, but she dutifully sat there and watched us play in the waves and for at least 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours. And, I'll just always be thankful for that time of life. You're 8 years old going to, some that kind of space between 8 years and like 12 years old is always a special.
Sure it is. Absolutely. Well, if we were to ask me that question, Brice, what is one of your fondest memories? This is the reason that I actually put this question here today was I had the opportunity back in, I believe it was 1990, put together a school program for a month where me and some other volunteers went down to Calexico, Mexico, to work on the Jimmy Carter housing project down there with Habitat for Humanity. And I was the sponsor of this, the one who organized this group to go. We had to have a teacher sponsor, but we were down there for about 3 weeks working in this, where they were building a whole bunch of homes, and had the distinct pleasure and honor of working alongside President Jimmy Carter for a couple of weeks. And it was really interesting to see a man who, I guess if I had to do the math, I guess he was somewhere around 70 years old at that point, and him and Rosalind was there as well, pounding away, doing actual physical labor. Yeah. The once leader of the free world, doing physical labor in a community that was literally built around a garbage dump. Yeah. I mean, that's how these people lived, was they sifted through the garbage to find things that they could sell or use. Yeah. And here we are building homes around the circumference of this place. The previous leader of the free world sitting here doing physical labor really makes you think. And
yeah, it's for President Carter, the one thing that I do respect the most about him is that, once he left the White House, he kind of went back to a relatively normal life, did not stay in the spotlight.
Wasn't interested in that.
Become like a political celebrity like so many of these former presidents are. Kind of by and large, left the campaign trail for the most part.
Right. Public life.
Exactly. And I always respected that.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, he's certainly he had his failures as a president, but everybody does, but he certainly had his share. But for me, he defined character. He's the definition of character. So certainly take a minute here to honor him as well.
Cool.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get to this, Garrett. The new year, the new me, how to change your money attitude in 2025. What are we going to be talking about here? So as we kick off 2025, a lot of people will consider what they want the year to look like and how to put their best foot forward, especially when it comes to finances. So let's think new year, new me to figure out what the new you is all about. Sometimes it helps to reflect first on what you've done in the past and what you want to change moving forward. And so today we're going to talk about the financial decisions and habits. I think habits is the key word here. You maybe had in the past and what changes you can make this year to embrace the new one. And I think with any of these 6 that we're going to go over here in the first and second segment, Garrett, we have seen these really repeatedly as a theme. So let's talk about this first one. The old you would be what, Garrett?
Overspending and living beyond your means.
Okay. Very common, right?
Yeah. And some of this is just kind of the keeping up with the Joneses or keeping on top of, something that's trendy or feeling like you always have to have the next best thing. And I guess Brice and I would pull out kind of our our affinity and our fandom of Dave Ramsey here and be like, hey, what are we overspending on things that do not matter from, I think his line is up for, trying to look good for people who don't really care about you. Agree.
It's really easy to live beyond your means, whatever that might mean, when you have a paycheck coming in.
Yes.
Because you're not on what's called a quote unquote fixed income like you might be in retirement.
Not yet.
And so it's very easy to not have to track your income versus your spending.
Mm. Yeah, I think people kind of, whether they realize it or not, they subconsciously self-budget. And what that means is like, I know I get X coming to me every 2 weeks.
Right.
And I can kind of float around and not really track the numbers.
Yes.
Because I'm going to spend pretty darn close to what it's coming into me every 2 weeks.
Right.
What we would encourage you to do is, start prioritizing what you're spending.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be quite as rigid as I say, like a Dave Ramsey, where we have like a plan for every dollar.
Right.
But at least when it comes to general categories, we need to know kind of roughly where we're at and have, absolutely no idea what you're spending that is not good. And it's interesting because we run into this with multiple families throughout the year. And I would say, Brice, that this is always one of the major pain points for, anyone who's going through this process. Very rarely is it someone that walks into our office and has a completely thorough budget. They're just 100% on top of what they spend to the dime. It doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen often, I should say. And even if it does happen, it's one of those things that it's always worth reworking and taking a second look at.
Yeah.
Particularly because, life changes over time. You go through kind of the years when you're newlywed, probably no children, to then, okay, we're raising children for a majority of families out there. Okay, now we're empty nesters. We still have children that we're kind of responsible for because they're in college and they may come home for long stints of time, but they're not fully with us. And then we get into this phase where both of us are still working, or maybe one is still working, but now the kids are out on their own. Expenses change throughout that every stage of life.
Yeah.
And then particularly going into retirement, okay, what are we looking like that budget? So if you say, yeah, we did our budget a year or two ago, it's always worth it.
It absolutely is. Yes, I agree. You said it all. I can't improve on that at all, Garrett. Thank you very much. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Wealth Guardian Show with Doug Ray, and in the studio this morning is Garrett Ray and Brice Payne. And we're saying thank you to joining us here for a little bit of your weekend morning. And we're talking about the new year, new me, how to change your money attitude in 2025. And the second one we want to talk about here is the old you, saving to a fault and not using your money to enjoy. That's the old you. Garrett, what would be the new you?
Yeah, so this is where we're going to, like the MLB pitcher, we're going to throw the change up, right? So if we just kind of got on you about not having a budget, you can go the other extreme too far where you're so much penny pinching and you're so miserly about how you spend that you're just kind of living a miserable life. The way that I think about it is that money is a tool. Mm-hmm. And so, money is a tool that you use, if you're really stripping down to kind of emergency, money is basically for survival, right? The bare necessities. Once you get beyond that, it's like, okay, what is kind of a nice to have type lifestyle? And then if we were just constantly living in the bare necessities world, and we saved and saved and saved out of fear, that's what I typically find. It's a lot of fear, or sometimes it can be not having a full understanding of what one actually needs. Again, going through the budget exercise, that's why it's so important.
Yep.
Is that, hey, I can live a little. And if I do choose to live a little, then if you, Mr. Advisor, can give me some guardrails, then I can feel better about taking that week vacation to Myrtle Beach or whatever it may be.
Right.
So
I agree completely. Good job. All right. Well, we're going to certainly get to some others here, but we do have to cut away for a break. And what do we do every weekend before we go into the break? It's trivia question time. So, Garrett, are you ready?
I hope so.
All right. Garrett, on January 17th is the birthday of this founding father. I'll put founding father in quotes there. He was, so I'm already giving it away, it's a he, 15th child of 17.
Jeez.
He went against the fashion trends at the time, and he wore his hair unstyled and wore plain suits. He is so famous for one particular thing that mentioning it here as a clue would be a dead giveaway, so I can't mention the thing that he's most famous for.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, he freed all of his slaves in 1760 and became one of the earliest public figure abolitionists.
Okay.
He is the only founding father who signed all three, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Treaty of Paris.
Okay.
This is going to be one, if Garrett's going to get it, this is the clue that's going to give it to him. He was the first postmaster general.
Okay.
I think I just saw the light bulb go on. He was an avid chess player and was inducted in the Chess Hall of Fame. And he became wealthy publishing his Poor Richard's Almanac. All right. That is our trivia question. So stick around to see if Garrett got that on the other side of this break. This is Brice Payne. With me is Garrett Ray. The show's The Wealth Guardians, helping you retire the job and keep the paycheck. And this is News Talk 94.5 WPTI. And this is 96.7 FM WTOB. News Talk 94.5 WPTI. 96.7 FM WTOB. Welcome back to the Wealth Guardian Show, where we help you retire the job and keep the paycheck. I'm Brice Payne in the Wealth Guardian studio this morning, along with Garrett Ray. And in this second segment, we're going to continue our discussion on New Year, New Me, how to change your money attitude in 2025. Happy New Year to everybody out there. Now, before we answer this trivia question that you got left with and that Garrett got left with at the end of that last segment, let me ask you something first. Are you planning to retire at some point in the future? Okay. Have you met with a retirement income certified professional who's also a fiduciary? If not, I'm going to invite you right now to take us up on a complimentary review of your current situation. So as certified retirement planning specialists, we're going to put together a customized written plan with strategies for portfolio allocation, income distribution, Social Security filing, tax efficiency, and the additional benefit of often reducing both the risk and the fees of your current plan. So if you put aside at least $400,000 and you want to take us up on this no-cost, no-obligation review, here's what you got to do. You got to pick up the phone and dial these numbers in this order: 336-391-3409. That's 336-391-3409. You can also go to our website, thewealthguardians.com, and sign up that way as well. That's thewealthguardians.com to learn more. Let us show you in black and white how to retire the job and keep the paycheck. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to this trivia question here. Garrett, are you ready again?
I believe so.
You've had some time over the break to think about it. I suspect you didn't even need that time. So January 17th is the birthday of this founding father. He was the 15th child of 17. He went against the fashion trends at the time. He wore his hair unstyled and wore plain suits. He is so famous for one particular thing that mentioning it here as a clue would be a dead giveaway. I'm going to see if Garrett actually knows that one too. He freed all of his slaves in 1760 and became one of the earliest public figure abolitionists. He is the only founding father who signed all three: the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, and Treaty of Paris. He was the first postmaster general, and he was an avid chess player. Garrett, who is this founding father who has a birth date on January 17th?
So initially I was thinking Thomas Jefferson, but I don't think that's it, even though Thomas Jefferson did go to Paris quite a bit. I believe it's Benjamin Franklin. Yeah.
There you go. It was that one, the first postmaster general. And of course, he's also known for his Poor Richard's Almanac. But as a follow-up question, Garrett, what was that thing that he's so famous for that I couldn't even bother mentioning, or you'd know it right away? Everyone out there would know it.
I mean, there's two things that come to mind. You could be talking about the whole, like, you flew the kite with the key on the end.
That's it.
The one that to me, though, about Benjamin Franklin that I've always liked is when he was returning from the Constitutional Convention, a woman on the road as he was riding by asked, Mr. Franklin, what type of country shall we have, sir? And his reply was a constitutional republic, lady, if you can keep it.
If we can keep it.
Yep. And that was always something that stuck out in my mind. My favorite quote from him.
I had heard that it was after they had done the signing, he came out of the building in Philadelphia, and that's when he was asked the question.
After the constitutional
what did you give us? What did you give us? We gave you a republic if you can keep it.
Yep.
Very good. All right. Well, let's go ahead now. Good job, Garrett, and everyone else out there who got it. Let's continue now our new year, new me, how to change your money attitude in 2025. The old you don't know how much you have or where it is, right? That's pretty common.
Yeah, we've run into that before, Brice. And, I guess I'll ask you, when you've been talking to someone like that who they have a little bit of money perhaps everywhere, but it's not really organized.
Right.
What is some of your advice that you help that person or that couple with?
Well, I can speak from the advice of my wife was this way when we first met.
Okay.
She had about 3 old 401ks out there. She had an IRA somewhere and was not particularly well organized. That can be a very daunting task for somebody, like calculating your budget. That is something that some people are very good at organization, and particularly the engineers who are out there like you. They just like to have everything in the proper folders, and they save their statements, and they know exactly where things are. They keep their passwords and their usernames all in the same space. But there's a lot of people out there who aren't like that.
Oh, yeah.
And they know that they've got a 401k out there. They know that they chose the mutual fund that they're investing, or the mutual funds that they're investing in a couple of years ago. But they think they get their statements. They're not sure. They don't always open them. And boy, they were at a job a couple of years ago and they had another 401k. They don't quite remember what they did with it, but it should have a couple of $1,000s or in it, whatnot. Mm-hmm. That's the old you.
Yes.
The new you, and I can tell you from personal experience and how many other people that we've encouraged them to go this new you route, and they are so glad that they did, is that let's understand where everything is. Let's know what those balances are. Let's know what our usernames and passwords are to get into those online accounts so that we can download the PDF statement whenever it comes out. And let's check in on it on at least a quarterly basis, like that, just to make sure that the monies are still there, that we're still invested in the thing that they knew that they were invested in. I can't tell you how often this happens, Garrett, but you've got an old 401k out there, and that's a company that you haven't worked at for 5 years, 10 years or so. It's still invested. But that company is eventually, at some point, going to change the third-party administrator who oversees those plans. And it's no longer Fidelity. It might be Truist or Empower or some other company now. And boy, did you move at some point between then and now, and they don't have your current address? Let's make sure that we get all of that straightened out so that when it comes time to, if something's going to happen to you, you want your spouse to be able to know where these accounts are, right? We want our advisor to be able to know what we're invested in our 401k. If your advisor, your financial planner, like us here at the Wealth Guardians, if we're deciding what your investments are in your IRAs and your Roth, shouldn't we have a good idea of what your investments are in your 401k as well? So we're not doubling up on too many of the same types of investments, or we're not having one strategy over here and a completely different strategy over here. Let's make those things sync up. So that's the new you. That's what I would encourage everybody out there to do, is just take a couple of minutes, write down where your accounts are. Now let's go in and try to log into those accounts. If you can't, it's not going to be a real hard time to update your password and be able to log into your accounts. Maybe a couple of hours work at the most. Now you've got everything in one place, right?
Oh yeah. Brice, it's kind of taking a fresh look at getting a more modern kind of approach to your investing, and your organization of your investing can be a really, healthy and rewarding thing. It kind of reminds me of when I very first started driving. And let's say I wanted to take like a multi-state trip. I'd go to print off the directions.
Yes, indeed.
And I had like 8 pages of directions. Will it get me there? Yes, it will. Is it much more inefficient than what I can do today with a fresh app that can, automatically
and knows where we're at that given second?
Exactly, and gives me course corrections along the way in one simple to understand plan? Absolutely. So
there you go.
Yeah, it just reminds me of two different ways to get someplace. One's much more efficient than the other.
It's all about efficiency. 2025, folks, is all about efficiency. It's clearly not going to be about the Broncos or the Panthers or the Green Bay Packers. So let's make it about efficiency, shall we? Okay. All right. So if you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Wealth Guardian Show. We're in our second segment here. It's Garrett Ray and Brice Payne in the studio with you. Doug Ray is over in his office, leaving the radio stuff to us today. And we're continuing our conversation on New Year, New Me, how to change your money attitude in 2025. So, Garrett, what's the next one we've got that we want to talk about?
Yeah, man, Brice, this one is interesting. So the old you out there would pause your investing until things, quote unquote, settle down. Man, and isn't there always something that needs to be settled down?
Oh, thank you.
Every week.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for saying that. I got my start in this field about 15 years ago at T. Rowe Price, answering phone calls, helping people get properly invested. And I can't tell you how many times somebody would say to me, you know what, there's just so much going on in the world right now.
Yeah.
As like, that's true. There is a lot going on in the world right now. But let's rewind 2 years. Let's rewind 5 years. Let's rewind 10 years, 20 years.
Yeah.
Can you find me a point where there wasn't so much going on in the world right now?
Exactly.
And the reason people will tend to use this as, I don't want to say a scapegoat, but it's the cause of them being concerned that this isn't quite the right time to be invested in the markets, because it's just, there's so much turmoil out there. I know that the second that I invest in the markets, things are going to go south. I just know it. So I'm just going to wait until things settle down. When are they ever going to settle down?
Right. There's always something going on. There's always some new world event that we get concerned about. If you wind back 3 years, what were we talking about? The Ukraine and Russia conflict, that's still going on today. Then you've got, the issue with, Israel and what's going on. Now today, what's in the highlights and the headlines, the wildfires in California, there's always something going on. We were talking to a prospect a couple years ago, and the guy was rightfully upset that he got burned during 2008, 2009, moved everything into cash.
I'm still there.
Guy had been in cash for over a decade now.
Yeah.
And still there. And it's incredible to me how that amount of time has lapsed, and he could have been up goodness knows how much more than his cash position now, just because he, out of fear, is still in cash from 2008, 2009. Now, granted, there's some investing time horizon stuff we got to talk about.
Thank you. Yes.
But by the time when he pulled out, he was still well within his working career, in his late 30s, early 40s.
And I don't want somebody out there to listen to this right now and say, Garrett and Brice are telling me to put all of my money in the market right now, right here today.
True.
That we are not giving you advice in that aspect, because we don't know the details of your situation. We don't know what you are saving for, how long until you're planning to retire, what your risk tolerance is, what your other portfolio, your 401k or whatever is out there that is invested. We don't know any of those details, and we would have to know those details to help you create a proper portfolio allocation. What we are telling you is that don't just let it sit on the back burner and never be invested. Because you're squirmish or scared of what the market is. That's not going to be a sound financial plan. That's not going to probably get you the type of retirement that you want to have.
Exactly. Not doing anything is not a plan.
There you go. Love it. Love it. In fact, let's go ahead, Garrett, and just close on that. Okay. I love that statement. Say it one more time.
Not doing anything is not a plan.
And unfortunately, that's all the time we have this week. Thank you for joining us. We hope the rest of your weekend is everything you want it to be. This is Brice Payne along with Garrett Ray. The show is The Wealth Guardians, helping you retire the job and keep the paycheck. And I want to remind you, sound financial plans do not create themselves. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you here next weekend. This is News Talk 94.5 WPTI. This is 96.7 FM WTOB.